Hey, listeners, before we get started today, I want to give a quick shout out and word to our sponsor, our very first sponsor, Rapido Solutions Group. Danny Frisco and Roberto Icaza, two longtime friends of mine, guys I've known for 10 plus years, the CEO and COO respectively and co-founders of Rapido Solutions Group. These guys know what they're doing. I'm excited to be partnered with them to give you a little glimpse into their business. Rapido connects logistics and supply chain organizations in North America with the best nearshore talent to scale efficiently, operate on par with US-based teams, and deliver superior customer service. These guys work with businesses from all sides of the industry, 3PLs, carriers, logistics, software companies, whatever it may be. They'll build out a team and support whatever roles you need, whether it's customer, carrier sales support, back office, or tech services. These guys know logistics. They know people. It's what sets them apart in this industry. They're driven by an inside knowledge of how to recruit, hire, and train within the industry and a passion to build better solutions for success. In the current market conditions where everyone is trying to be more efficient, do more with less, nearshoring is the latest and greatest tactic that companies are deploying to do so, and Rapido is a tremendous solution for you. So check them out at gorapido.com, and thank you again for being a sponsor to our show, a great partner. We look forward to working with you. And to our listeners, that's it. Let's get the show on the road. Welcome back to another episode of the Freight Pod. I'm your host, Andrew Silver. We've got a very interesting and unique story today that we are going to be walking through. You know, let me put it this way. We're not in the breaking news element of this business, but I feel like we're kind of in the breaking down news in that, you know, we're getting to a place where when there are big events happening, we've been able to get some of the key players within those events on the show to really talk about what's going on with their business or their situation. And I'm really fortunate to be able to do that today as I welcome Omar Singh to the show. We're going to talk about Surge Transportation, their journey up and then down and hopefully back up for them. So welcome to the show, Omar. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Andrew. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you. Been over a year, so it's nice to be on. First time out in a while. Kind of
Yep.
almost out of exile, maybe, if that's how we can call it. But
Yep.
yeah.
I get it. You put the jacket on. It's like feels like you're finally getting back to work a little bit.
Yeah, I haven't had one on for a little bit. I've gone to a couple of events, food shippers, a couple of E2 open events, but I've sort of been just focusing on the restructure and staying home. Much less travel, much less dressing up. But it didn't feel right to just kind of have gym clothes on in this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I will say for me, as I was, I sat out this non-compete for a year. It's been a year and a half now, I guess, and I didn't wear much other than sweatpants and gym shorts for that time. And as I started getting back into more professional settings, it was a little uncomfortable at first.
Yeah,
Putting on a nice shirt and whatnot.
yeah. I decided at least to just like drop the collar, but I figured I should at least do something here. You know.
Yeah. Well, listen, I don't want to jump right into the kind of meat of this. Let's start with your story and go back a little bit. So how did you first get into the industry, and walk me through kind of your background getting to that place?
All right. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate starting kind of at the beginning, even though I'm sure there's a lot of current stuff to bring everybody up to speed. But, I think like a lot of people, I kind of got into the industry unplanned, right? And even I graduated from high school in 94 and I got my CDL in 94. But I think even supply chain degree programs were very few and far between. So I think even in the 90s, entrants to the industry weren't doing it necessarily by career design, but sort of just kind of found themselves one way or another. And, I think back then it was called inventory management or, whatever, getting in kind of without a career path like there is now.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm an English teacher by training. I have 2 degrees in English, and I started driving trucks in '94 to pay for college. I went to a state school in Virginia for undergrad, and at the time, it was kind of possible to work all of the hours moving furniture and driving, straight trucks my first year, to pay in-state tuition after just, kind of 3, 4 months of work. Um, so I got into that very quickly. My boss took me under his wing. Within a couple of months, I was driving Class B trucks. And then within a year, I was driving Class A. And then it just kind of stuck with me. I did it throughout all of college, and it worked out to pay and kind of have side money. We would do office moves at night in Washington, D.C. After all the offices would close, we'd have 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. to do these kind of massive moves. And that was, I don't know, it was just fun at that age. And then I moved out to California to Teach for America after I got out of undergrad. Taught there for a while, but I was moving up and down, kind of San Jose down to LA area on the weekends. I was driving trailers down, dropping them off, swapping, coming back for an Atlas agent. And then kind of stayed really like in love with trucking and driving. And then when I was doing that, I was driving sleepers for the first time. And you can imagine just driving the West Coast after growing up on the East Coast it was just an adventure, really, and really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. And then so I moved back to DC and went to Georgetown for graduate school after teaching, and thought I was going to get into teaching as my career, and anticipated, like so many teachers, not making money, for the first few years. So I thought I'd lay the groundwork by driving over the road, for a few years before getting into my career. So I bought a truck as an owner operator, and I drove over the road for 3 years. And then my plan was going well. As an owner operator, I was saving money, and I bought my second home at that point. And then kind of mistimed the hiring season for teaching one year. I thought I was going to come off the road, put my truck up for sale, and anyway, I mistimed it. The teachers got hired way before the next school year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started a trucking company. I thought I would do it on the side until the following kind of teaching hiring season started. And then, anybody who's owned trucks knows that's just not something, you can hop in and out of, in a 9 month period. And so also all of my friends were drivers at the time, and I still had my over the road truck. Um, and so I started a company called Jando Trucking in 2003, and
Okay.
kind of built that up on sort of a lease operator, owner operator, and then we went to employee, model. But I ran that until 2010, and kind of bled out in the recession. So this industry, as cyclical and hard as it can be on people, I went through it in 2008, 9, and 10, and then but in that period, like really the kind of the hardest years, which were 8, 9, and 10, I developed some legacy, what I call legacy customer relationships that allowed me to pivot into brokerage in early 2011 because I had sort of those relationships established. And in many ways, kind of those legacy customers from that period, 8, 9, and 10, are the ones that helped me get into brokerage successfully. I started out at Landstar as an agent, and then moved to a couple of other agent-based companies. And those same legacy customers helped me start Surge. And to be
So
honest with you, those same legacy customers are the ones that have helped me restore Surge today. So,
so very kind of fascinating. So you're a trucker at heart.
yeah, I love it. I love driving. My
Yeah.
22-year-old son's a driver. And my 20-year-old son's moving furniture this summer. So,
I mean,
yeah.
what can you say in terms of? I mean, it's just really interesting that from straight out of high school, every opportunity you got, or any it seems like any free time you had, you figured you'd get in the truck and drive, whether it was furniture or out on the West Coast. Just talk to me a little bit about what kind of lessons you have from being in the truck and that kind of mindset you had over those years.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very gritty kind of hard work. Also, you got, if it's furniture, people are obviously always very concerned with their goods. So you have to have also a real service mentality in addition to, of course, the work, because summertime, I mean, I've said a couple of times, it's not every week, but I mean, there are weeks every summer where we would clock, 100 hours on the clock, and it was brutal, and hard work. And then kind of every day you're getting back to the yard at 7 p.m. thinking, oh, I only had a 12-hour day. And then the dispatcher goes,
Only.
I got two crews out there. They're going to be out till 2 a.m. Could you give them some relief? And they're like your friends, so you kind of can't say no. And then you come back and you end up sometimes sleeping in the trailer because it's just not worth going home for 3 hours. So, and then you just start work again. They give you uniforms. But I was determined to save as much as I could, to pay for college. Like I said, back then, in-state tuition was about $4,000 a year, and I could make about $12,000 a summer. So it's a sort of an easy no-brainer, and then have a little bit of, money for during the school year in addition to night moves or weekend moves. And then it was the same way as, I mean, an owner operator. It was just a different era of kind of moving and tariffs, and the money was pretty good. I guess it always is if you work that many hours. But I was able to, from all of the money that I saved doing that, of course, and then when I was teaching on the West Coast and making extra money then, and their hourly wages on the West Coast are pretty good, like double time on Sundays all day, in California, which is, it was helpful as a teacher to have extra money. But,
Of course.
I bought my first condo when I got into graduate school before I enrolled. And then I sold that condo for a huge profit when I graduated. And then I took all of that profit and I put it on a down payment on my first truck, which is actually right there. It was a custom sleeper with a shower and kitchenette. And, my son Omar was already born. So we bought a car seat, bolted it into the floor, and left. So like it was always an adventure to me. It was exciting.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah.
So, I mean, when you were running your trucking company, did you haul for brokers as well, or just direct customers?
So I think like all of them, we started out hauling for brokers. I had no idea what I was doing. I was trying to sort of feel out if I could get some sort of play off of moving and storage. And so there was a little while where we were running slot machines for casinos. Like so it was all
Okay.
blanket wrapped and kind of white glove, in and out of Vegas round trip. And I just, it never really took off. But so then it was brokers for a couple of years. And then I would say probably after year two, it was all customer direct. We had built up to 30 trucks, which is, it's enough for somebody to, kind of sit down and have a conversation with you about some annual freight, rather than, it's just so hard when you have, call it 5 trucks to go to a large shipper and get,
Yep.
a contract. But yeah, it was just classic door knocking, going to warehouses in the area. It was sort of terrifying. They all have these do not solicit, trespassers
Oh
will
yeah.
be violated or whatever, violators will be
Prosecuted.
prosecuted,
Yep.
and then you kind of knock on the door and waiting for them to call the police. You go, well, I have trucks. Go, oh, you're allowed in. Nobody else is
You are
allowed in.
not a
You got
violator.
trucks. Come on in. Would you like a glass of water? It's hot outside. You know? So, yeah, so
That's
after a
great.
couple of years, it was all 100% customer direct freight.
So knowing, I guess, the sentiment that shippers had towards brokers, and also, I guess, your own experience, what was it about that decision you made to become a broker in 2010? Why did you make that choice?
Well, for me, I mean, to be honest with you, that's a story I've never told. Um, but
Well, now's your
it
chance.
definitely occurred over time, and it was really hard for me to learn how to sell, call it on service and value on non-asset rather than on kind of asset and price, which is, it's not always asset and price versus service and value. But when I joined Landstar, kind of in 2010, early 10, we closed end of October of 10, so kind of the end of 10. I'd spent about a year kind of vetting where what I thought I was going to do was place my fleet of trucks, right? And so I attempted to move as a what they call kind of a an asset agent rather than a broker agent. And I joined thinking that that's was going to be the move, that I'd be able to keep the customers that I was working with. I would stay under asset contracts, and I would bring my drivers over and my trailers over, and you get all of these kind of efficiencies and economies of scale when you join a large fleet rather than when you're a small company. And then with all of the savings that we got from economies of scale, we would be able to continue being a trucking company. Um, and that didn't turn out to be what happened. For whatever reason, whether it was by design or by mistake, couldn't get the drivers qualified. So went out and tried to hire 150 new drivers, and they couldn't get qualified, and it didn't work. So I lost all the trucks and lost all the trailers, and then kind of had this brokerage contract, which I thought was very just secondary to everything I tried to do.
Yeah.
And there's a thing there. I mean, I still have a good relationship with them, and the people I was working with back in 2010 and 11 aren't there anyway. Um, but there's a thing where they say that their agents aren't successful until they get rid of their trucks, because the trucks are so just time consuming and just a resource drain, and managing drivers is harder than managing customers and whatever it is. So I don't know if it was by design, but I didn't
Got
get
it.
my trucks or my drivers qualified, and then I had to learn to sell differently. But the idea was always to stay an asset provider and stay a trucker and stay, in what I was doing, and to keep my team together. And then that didn't happen, kind of partially. And then I just had to learn how to sell differently. Um, and I think it's a transition a lot of people really have a hard time doing. And to this day, there's asset-based brokerages that have a few trucks but try to go in on an asset contract because it's just a different sell. And
It's
then
easier.
kind of develop the business model that we have to this day, which is trying to sell on not being the primary, and bringing value to times when primaries are unavailable. Um, and that is just, it was a really hard sell to learn. But I think, for the most part, we got there.
Yeah. So Surge starts in what year did you start Surge? 2013 or
Technically
2010?
2016, November of 16, I started Surge. I started trading as Surge in like 2014 because, I had the idea. But the idea of kind of what we do, and I'd understood our business model, kind of, I don't know if I want to say perfected it, but got it to a point where I had a narrative, I had a strategy, which was, to be there when primaries are unavailable for one reason or another. There are plenty of reasons, just if nothing else, forecast is linear, demand's not linear. That's kind of one of my things. But so I started doing business as Surge in 2013 or 14, but then officially incorporated the company in 16. I did a quick bounce from Landstar to another large national firm, really quick length of stay there, into another large national firm, quick length of stay there, and then took Surge Independent in 16. And those
Just
bounces were sort of like testing if I would be able to bring customers over, if they could sign new contracts, if there would be any non-compete issues. I had, a Schedule A when I joined, which was my legacy customers that were portable, but you never know, how things are going to go. So I did a couple of bounces to tap and test the market to see if I'd be able to kind of pull off becoming an independent company again.
yeah. So were those other agent based businesses that you were bouncing between?
Yeah.
Help me understand because I've never dabbled in the agent model, and I just for a second, I don't want to spend a ton of time here, but help me understand the thought behind agent versus W-2, and why why you would choose to be an agent, and um you know how easy or worthwhile it is, or if the jumping from one to another, what that looks like.
Well, it's challenging. In my quick jumps were partly, there were parts of it that were successful and there are parts of it that aren't. Um, but for the most part, say agents are cradle to grave, and employees are split model. So the agent kind of has to be a real grinder. You're working on commission only, so there's no base salary whatsoever. My kind of hours of work were similar to moving furniture. As say cover 100 loads a week. I'd build my loads from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., cover the loads from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m., and then bid on loads from 11 a.m. until 6 7 p.m. Manage the expedites at night, then start all over at 4 a.m. and maybe I was doing the work of 4 or 5 people, but if you're not paying anybody and you're getting that commission, then you can
You get it all.
yeah, you can do a lot more than with a W-2 if you're willing to put in the work and you have some relationships. And then when they take care of back office, it's also kind of don't have that, carrier onboarding, compliance, AR, AP, you just kind of have a little bit of payroll. And you're an independent company. Technically, all of the agents have to have some tax ID, whether they trade as a real company name like Surge Transportation, or they just trade as, call it Omar Singh Inc. And you don't ever use your name, you just use the parent company's name. So some people brand themselves separately, but they're still running all of the receivables and payables through the parent company. And some people brand themselves with the parent company. Um, and then it's just very challenging in the national firms, which was also part of my desire to switch, because they're all very established and all of the kind of accounts that everybody wants to go after are assigned to an office already. So kind of getting your foot in the door and picking up kind of the crumbs of any shipper who's not assigned to an office is challenging. And then, when it's very difficult to diversify your customer base. And then you have customers who go through acquisitions, or transportation managers change, especially with a business model like mine, which was to be like reasonably priced, but a little bit higher than primaries in order to do, the difficult work. Kind of new managers come in and go, boom, you're out. Right. And so we're going to cut costs here, and I'm going to kind of make my mark. And then it's 6 to 9 months before they bring you back in. So every time that happens, it's like, okay, I just lost 6 months of revenue, or I just lost 9 months of revenue. I need to get more customers. And then all the customers are assigned to another office. So that was one of the challenges, and one of the reasons, I mean, kind of for going independent. So I need to be able to try to sell to everybody rather than just kind of the leftovers of who's not assigned.
Yeah, I mean that is the beauty of starting your own brokerage,
Right.
is just that freedom to pursue whoever you want. I remember that for myself when I moved from Coyote to us starting Molo. It was at Coyote. It was like there were so many sales reps and so many accounts already taken. So like the biggest account I could go after was just not that big. And all of a sudden I get to Molo, and I just remember sitting and looking and being like, "Holy crap, it's all mine! Like
Right.
I can go
Yeah.
after whoever I want. And I'm going after
Yeah.
all of them."
Yeah. Yeah. They're all
That's a
assigned to
it's
me. Yeah.
yeah, it's a great feeling. So
Yeah.
let's talk about Surge. Let's talk about the beginning and walk me through the first couple of years, what you were trying to accomplish, what the team looked like. This was a bootstrapped business, I believe. It sounds like most of your life has been bootstrapped, so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
assume
It
this
was
was also
definitely
bootstrapped.
bootstrapped. Yeah.
Um, talk me through those first couple of years, 2016, right? So
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
So probably the day we started, 2016, I actually, I always have had, I don't want to say always, but I mean, maybe since 2014, had a legacy team in Jacksonville from my Landstar days, because, I was there a lot doing agent development workshops and training and IT, committees. And so I was kind of just very involved with corporate and even corporate sales as an agent, maybe more so than a lot of other ones are. So I was down there a lot, and anytime I had kind of surges, I would try to hire people where I live in Virginia, and they're Washington D.C. Metro. It's a transient area. It's hard to kind of keep people. It's also very high cost of living, transient labor pool, cost of labor is high. And so it was challenging for me to kind of build a team here. And, port cities, not to mention, a Landstar city, or there's lots of brokerages there. They're good supply chain cities because they're always supply
Of
chain
course.
degree programs. There's ports, which bring railroad, which brings trucking, which is ocean shipping, and everything's around these port cities. So I have found them to be good kind of labor pool cities for hiring people who want to work in logistics rather than like people you have to force them to give it a
Convince.
shot.
Yeah.
Um,
Never
so
thought
I
about that.
hired
That
some
makes
people in
sense.
Jacksonville, and so I had a few people always, like two or three. So when we started Surge in 2016, it was two or three of us just kind of grinding out, building loads, and then we have responsibility for P&L, and that all changed. But it was like very much an unknown. I mean, so I would always like, it was one thing for kind of my large legacy customers to say, okay, I'll follow you to, brokerage B, or I'll follow you to brokerage C because they're large national multi-million dollar, $100 million, $1 billion firms, with this great kind of financial stability that we require in our partners. And then they all like would say, if you go independent all by yourself, then I'll also support you. But you don't know that they can actually make that happen, So maybe they want to, they just can't. Um, so it was, I would say 16, 17 were like proof of concept years, like, will I be able to get an office lease? Will I be able to get customers to actually onboard me? I know they want to, they might not be allowed to. Will I be able
Hmm.
to get insurance? Will I be able to get motor carriers to haul the freight? Will we be able to get factors to give us credit, so we can cover loads? Like there's all these like what ifs, so it's kind of a big chance. And then by the end of 17, so we're still way out in front of COVID, right? By the end of 17, it was like, okay, so proof of concept works. We got it. Now we don't have the monthly subscription TMS, but, kind of a much more robust TMS. We got nice office space. What nice? I mean, just, we're not working out of my basement or
Yep.
what if someone else's basement, right? So, and then we've got credit with the factors. We've got good payment history. We've got everything like, so now we have something that works, but it was still very much like these four legacy customers, right? That stuck with me through everything. And then I said,
What was,
okay,
before you go on, what was that, those first 2 years, what was the most challenging thing in your mind?
I think getting started is hard. Everyone will tell you that, right? Getting started. I mean, I'm really lucky. I'll be honest with you. We went live in November of 16. That was, I think, our authority, and our first load was November 2nd or November 3rd of 16. And I just hit this huge Q4 push, which was partly auction. It was partly, our business model has been 30-day rates, 60-day rates, 90-day rates, or just backup overflow, 12-month, but they're going to be high. Anyway, so we hit like a 60-day rate, which January of 17 stayed busy. And so I had a good like 90-day push of, we're all working day and night, three or four of us. And I was able to, generate some cash. And then we went 6 months without a load. And yeah. And so,
Not literally without a
I
load,
mean,
right?
there were like a couple,
Here and there.
there were
Yeah.
a
Okay.
couple. Yeah.
A tough 6 months.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
There was a
got you.
tough 6 months. I mean, it was, we had some people not take payroll. Tadina and I went and got, set up as drivers for Uber and Lyft. And we were
Oh,
like,
wow.
yeah, I don't know if this is going to, kind of happen or not. And then, stuff just started coming in. And that's what a lot of people say. It takes 6 months to get started, whether it's RFP cycles or just kind of summer season started kicking in, things just kind of started happening.
You just reminded me of something that my first Brian Brenner said this to me my first week in customer sales. And I spent the first 5 years of my career in carrier sales, which is that kind of short-term instant gratification. Every phone call is a potential win. You
Right.
get a book, you get a load booked, and you start building that. And I was really accustomed to that. And then
Yeah.
I moved into customer sales. I'd just gotten home from Michigan and uh, called Brian and he was like, great, you're coming to customer sales, but Andrew, I know you pretty well. Let me tell you something. You're going to get told no a lot. It's
Yeah.
going to take 6 months before you get your first yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, no chance, man. Like,
Right.
I'm not, no chance. And he's like, I'm
Yeah.
telling you, just be patient. It will take 6 months. And I did work around that because I went and got some grimy freight. I was going
Right.
after this ugly produce. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't care how ugly it is. I need loads on the board. I'm not
Right.
sitting here with nothing to do.
Yeah.
But that is, as you said, that's kind of the way it is in this business. You
Right.
know, the most, at least good shippers, aren't going to give you an opportunity the first time you email or call them, and probably the first 10 times you email or call them. I think a lot of them want to see you're even willing to have the persistence to follow up and stay with them for a long enough time to show it's worth it to them.
Yeah. And then if you're lucky enough for that to happen, they say, I'll invite you to my next annual RFP, which is in 6 months, and it takes 90 days to run the process. So, around 12 months from now, thanks for calling me 37 times, you'll have a chance to go live.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's hard. It's really challenging. And to get them
Yeah.
to just to say, yeah, I'll just activate you and good luck on the weeklies. I mean, it takes like a really large, complex supply chain for people to have weeklies every week, right? And then to
Yep.
say, okay, we have this huge auction opportunity. You can do that. And then, we'll start you on weeklies. You don't have to wait for an annual RFP. And as a matter of fact, this manufacturing plant just went down and I need 30-day rates on, 50 lanes or,
Yeah.
whatever. But
I mean,
so
that's where it's like, one, getting creative to just find another way in, find another avenue to get some business in there. And it's hard. And oftentimes there's just no way around it. And two is just making sure you're available when that one opportunity does show up, whether it's
right.
9 o'clock at night, a Saturday, the day before Christmas, whatever it is. There's
Yeah.
most companies at some point during their year have some level of emergency where they get let down, and that's that one
Right.
chance you might get to forego the 9 to 12 month wait for the RFP results or whatever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always that, right? I mean, and I can tell you countless examples, but the one that just came to mind right now, which I think is funny, it made me think of, but just countless examples of you trying to go out and do something with your family, and they just have to understand, and maybe they do and maybe they don't, but you go, we're going out to a nice dinner or we're doing something, and then the call drops, and you go, well, we're going back home, and they want to say, I thought we were going out to dinner. And you go, well, we're not. We're not anymore.
I'm going to make sure we can pay for future dinners because we're going to go deal with this right now.
So we were on a trip. This is still my Landstar days, but we were on a Disney World trip, and I was in line for one of the rides, with the kids and, my wife at the time. And, just the call came and said, I need 30 loads moved this weekend from Virginia to Texas. Like, something went down and I need them moved. And I was like, all right, well, you guys have fun at the park, and I'll be in the hotel room for the rest of the weekend. And that's just
how you got to do, though.
Yeah.
All right. So. Well, let's get back to it. So we talked about those first 2 years. So you said, eventually kind of things started picking up, at which point I assume you started hiring more. Walk me through those kind of next few years leading into COVID and what the business looked like as it continued to grow.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that you'll probably, I'm guessing you hear a lot. One of the things that I really struggled with being a small company at that time, I mean, I don't even know you call it a small company. You call it like just a little bit over solopreneur, right? Like a lifestyle company, right?
How many people would you say?
It's still 4 or 5 people.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe 10. I don't know. But it's this whole dilemma of I know people say this, and there's probably a term. Do I hire somebody to go out and do the sales because I'm so invested in the operation, service, and execution that if they can bring in customers, I'll make sure everything goes well. Or do I try to do sales because I kind of know people and now have some familiarity in the industry, and then hire people on the execution, and then of course the pros and cons are, if I do sales and they can't execute, then there's no point in doing the sale. But if I hire them to sell and really, it's hard. It's hard to bring on organic new outside business development, which it's not the same as reactivating existing accounts. It's not the same as finding new revenue streams and active accounts. Like just going out and creating something out of nothing is very challenging. Um, but so I decided to try to just start with some outside salespeople, um, and then what I thought would be, I guess, the operation, but really, I mean, a lot of credit, to Dina well, my wife. I mean, she
Mm-hmm.
really pushed me to sort of get out in front of the industry, get out on stage, do a lot of writing, do a lot of public speaking. And while that's like kind of marketing, it's not sales, it ended up being really team selling. So, I had my first guy that that started in 2018. It took us about 6 months to kind of find somebody. And then we would do, the like scripted way to build your brokerage, which is to go to the conferences, get the attendee list, meet the people, follow up on the attendee list, ask for meetings, and then and then get the meetings. And kind of that's
Yep.
what it was. So 2018 to 2019, he and I did 250 in-person customer visits. So we were just flying all over the map and then trying to do operations from the hotel room, early in the morning, set the day up for success. And then we were just meeting anywhere we could get a meeting. We were doing it. We were crisscrossing paths. We weren't clustering, so we'd go Seattle one day and then Chicago the next day and then Portland the next day and then Massachusetts the next day and then California the next day. It was just like nuts. Just anywhere we could get a meeting when someone said they would do it.
Yep.
And then that was really like the foundation in many ways for when COVID hit, because like we were just saying a minute ago, people would responded well, right, to the story and to the business model, and they'd say, and this is now 2019. By the time you get in the meetings, they'll say, okay, I'll invite you to my next RFP, or I'll call you when um, there's a pandemic, right? I'll call you when I need you. I like you, but right now it's 2019. Freight market's soft. You guys seem like you're, okay, but there's just no opportunity. So,
Yep.
but little by little, those would turn into, something. We get into an RFP and win a couple of lanes and have some opportunities in spot. And then I got hit with the kind of double whammy of I know you guys were Anheuser-Busch Carrier of the Year one year, right?
Yeah.
2022,
2020.
2020.
2020.
Okay. So
I think 2020.
2019, if it's also a testament to the speaking at conferences, they were one of my legacy long-term customers, but they were very transactional and small, just the payment terms and other things. It was just a harder account for me to figure out what to do with, but they were an active account. Um, and so their transportation manager saw me, spoke on a panel at CSCMP, and just appreciated. At that time, I was talking about routing guide strategies. I didn't even know what an API was, but just kind of the strategy of being lower on the routing guide, second or third, and being reasonably priced to cover freight that primaries can't. That was
Yep.
just the strategy. Um, and forecast is linear and demand isn't. And then transportation managers go, yeah, that makes sense. Why doesn't anybody sell on that, right? But anyway, so he invited me to be part of their dynamic rate tree, what
Yep.
you're, yeah, probably familiar with. And then so
Of
it gave
course.
me their specs and said, right into our API system, like, do you have the capability of doing this? And I mean, I certainly, like, at the time didn't, but I try to take calls like on LinkedIn. People, solicit you for stuff, and software companies would hit me up all the time and say, we can build anything you want built. Well, I don't need anything built. Like I have a
Yeah.
TMS, like we can build a load board. It's like, no, I just use other load boards. We can build a TMS. And I have a TMS. And then so he offered me this opportunity to build kind of a dynamic pricing model. And we already had this like algorithmic pricing that we did in Excel. So we already had like inbound, outbound states, length of haul, minimum rate per mile, minimum flash. We already had that in Excel. So it was kind of a little bit fast to deploy that logic. But I called that software company and said, I have this opportunity. Can you, you know, can you do this? And they just said, yeah. They said, and then you start learning about JSON, language communications and APIs and XML and like all this stuff. And they're like, yeah, 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 we can do that. We can do that. We can do that. We can do that. And then so we went live with AB March of 2020 when the whole world, went nuts. So it
People
was
certainly were drinking a lot more at that
yeah,
point.
yeah. So it was nuts though, because you had 2018 pipeline that was ready to kind of go live, 2019 pipeline that was ready to go live, and then this API capability when everything hit March of 2020. And I mean, in many ways, we'll get there, but that just really led to something I wasn't prepared for. I never really thought, I mean, I was excited about the idea of getting out and changing the way people view brokers' roles in the industry and writing about different strategies and speaking. But I really honestly thought at most I would have maybe a little bit of a larger lifestyle business, 20 people, 30, I don't know. That I always thought in my mind from my trucking company days, I had 75 drivers on 30 trucks and we were slip seating and running 2 shifts. And like in my mind, I had this like 50 people is the most I think I'm really like good at managing kind of all aspects of the organization. So I never thought I would get like in this position to go from probably where we were March of 2020, 20 people in the entire company to, almost 300, like very quickly, and then trying to manage that. And it led to obviously, kind of where I landed, but in part, so anyway, so I don't know if I even answered your question.
You did. Let me jump in here because you gave me a lot there, and there's probably 4 things I want to say. So to just backtrack a second, I was really interested by Tadina. I think Tadina gave you phenomenal advice to get out there, start writing, start going to conferences, and show who you are to the industry. And you made a comment that was, I don't know if that's marketing more so than sales. I don't think it matters what someone calls it. I think the smartest thing that a growing business, brokerage especially, I guess I shouldn't speak about anything other than brokerage because that's what I know. But the smartest thing an owner, a CEO, a president of a brokerage can do is show the world who they really are and get out there and be your authentic self and preach what you preach who you are and what you stand for and what the business stands for. And if you do it authentically and with some passion, I think it's an easy way, not easy, but it's a way to get natural buy-in. And it is sales, it is marketing, but it's not sales in like a, hey, I'm coming to solicit your business. It's more, I just want to show you who we are. And then you can decide if you want to be a part of our journey. And that works.
Yeah.
You guys did have a very big presence. I mean, the only way you and I know each other is through this conference circuit. And the way you guys present yourselves at conferences, it was very out there. I mean, with the magician and everything, that was something that kind of drew me to you. And then next thing you know, we decided let's grab dinner one day, and I realized you're a great guy, and that's I think partially why we're sitting here today. So I just wanted to speak to that for a second.
Thank you.
Second to that comment, I want to talk about. I just think it's an interesting strategy. You talk about not trying to go and be the primary on the bid, and it's very different than kind of our approach at Molo and what I was trying to do and our team was trying to do, where we wanted to go win that contractual business. We wanted to have guaranteed revenue in the door that we knew we would be able to manage, and it made it easier for us to forecast and grow. And bear in mind, we had some investment behind us, and so these are kind of things that people need to think about as they develop the strategy for their business. We thought that, we knew we were taking some risk in going and getting a lot of contract freight. And that risk is, the market goes up in rates and you're stuck with these long-term prices that you've committed to, but it also serves as insurance. It's a way to know that you're going to have business in the door day in and day out for your team to manage, and allows you to go higher to make sure that you can keep people busy. And it's a little bit of betting on yourself that, hey, you can service this business so well that the customer is going to find ways to give you more business in the event that things go sour and that, you get to a place where you're losing money on your primer or whatever. The counter to that is your approach, which is I don't need to be primary. I'm going to put rates on file that I know I can make money at. And I don't, the only thing that's not guaranteed is how much business is going to come in the door through that. And the only thing I can think to add there is it's really important that you're 10xing the opportunities. I might be able to get away with 10 opportunities. This is an arbitrary number, but 10 opportunities because I know all 10 I'm getting primary guaranteed business on. You're going to need 50 opportunities, again, arbitrary, but just a bigger number to ensure that business funnels through, because we don't know if the primary is going to take it or reject it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I just wanted to kind of throw some thoughts in there on top of your commentary, because I thought it was all really good. And both of us have that kind of common relationship to Anheuser-Busch. I will always be grateful to Anheuser-Busch because they were the first enterprise shipper to give Molo a chance. And I said it from day one, whoever the first one is, we will be going to the ends of the earth to make sure they're taken care of. And I think that's partially why we got Carrier of the Year for them one year.
Right.
Because it's an appreciation for someone taking a chance on you when you're an upstart company that nobody knows.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it's like, it's in many ways it's hard because, I don't know, the right way to articulate it, but yeah, you're like deeply moved by these things that people do, and you kind of feel that they're your friends, right? If not your friends, your colleagues, or I don't know, more than just business, right? And then when you have these businesses and things go bad in many ways, like so this year, I've certainly held my family closer and my wife closer, and and everybody, but like in many ways, like I feel like I lost a lot of friends, because like they're my people, and the people who you work with there's like relationships, they're real relationships, that mean something. And and we appreciate it deeply. And then it's also hard when, well, for me, things went south. For you, you're just being told you're not allowed to talk to them for a while, right?
Yeah.
But maybe you can as a friend anyway, but not,
of course.
Work. Yeah.
So one more thing before we kind of jump into, I guess, what a lot of people maybe came to hear, but I hope people will appreciate the entirety of the story. I noticed when the bankruptcy first happened, Surge was called by FreightWaves a digital broker.
Yeah.
I never knew you as a digital broker, and I'm curious, would you have classified yourself as a digital broker?
That's kind of a loaded question. I don't even know necessarily what a digital broker is, but I think it's like if there's a catchphrase for a very tech-enabled, like maybe if that. So I don't really agree with the term, for one,
Okay.
But for two, I would say probably. I would think that if someone's trying to capture the essence of what a digital broker is when they say it, I'm thinking like investment backed, maybe Silicon Valley backed, or some form of startup with technology that's supposed to take over the industry, consolidate this fragmented market into kind of just a few big players is the idea. So I don't know that there are any digital brokers, but certainly I wasn't one of them, and I never represented our company as that. I did have a period where part of our marketing was to call ourselves hybrid, like traditional and digital. So we would say, we would use some, tech capability to price loads and sometimes even source carriers, but then we would move freight the traditional way by relationships with motor carriers, talking to every driver, just cell phone tracking, whatever it is. So maybe the word digital hit like a slide, but no, we never. No.
Well, I thought you wrote a really well-written piece a few years ago. I happened to just read it because I was doing some research on you before this call, but it was kind of about the demystifying digital broker concept, and spoke to how the digital concept maybe works a lot better in a B2C environment than it does in a B2B environment. But it does sound like, based on our conversation today, you had a very bootstrapped business and had technology support through your TMS and whatnot. And then it was as a result of a customer opportunity, making your own investment into the kind of API pricing model, which is one kind of facet of if you were going to say digital brokerage is 95+% automated movement A to Z of freight, pricing would be one part of that. But it sounds like you never let go of the human element of having people involved in dealing with the drivers on a day-to-day basis. And, it's kind of that transactional versus relational business approach. And I think especially on the carrier side is where that becomes important. So does that kind of, did I
Yeah, no, I
summarize it
agree
effectively?
entirely. It was certainly like we had the algorithmic pricing model, which we continued to improve upon, even after we developed, the first kind of release to create all these new variables and criteria. But then, yeah, it was just a automated way of pricing with the kind of human follow through and traditional way of doing things after that. So, I mean, you could even compare it to RFP pricing. It was just faster and at the level of the load rather than at the level of the lane.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, other than that, that was the only digital element was fast pricing.
Okay. So now let's get into, I guess, well, let's start with the business at its peak. What did the company look like in terms of people, revenue, like loads per day? Like at its highest point, what did that look like?
Yeah, so our peak probably like a lot of people was, about Q4 of 2021 into Q1 of 2022.
Yep.
So yeah, during those 6 months, we had, a few months with a $300 million run rate, not
Yep.
annual sales.
Understood.
Yeah. Just over 280 people onshore and offshore. So legacy offices were Jacksonville, which is still standing. And then, of course, we moved into Chicago in 2020, February of 2020. So,
Great time to get an office.
yeah, great time to sign a big office lease, right? Yeah.
I did
Um,
something similar, so it's okay.
yeah. And those job interviews in that first year were crazy because I was determined to build a team, to work in the office. So we're hiring during shelter in place, and, having COVID outbreaks, and it was just kind of nuts. But
Yep.
anyway, and then we had some, Philippines, which largely was second shift, weekends, third shift, a lot easier to hire there because of the time difference. And then, we had some down in South America, and in many ways, like Tadina and I went and we lived down in Medellin for a few months, and my IT guy was down there, and so we were kind of very hands on. It was more of like a surge office um, than just completely remote. And then the guys and people would come down from Chicago and stay there for weeks at a time. And so, but yeah, so 280 people, 2,000 loads a week, and 4 offices, a scattering of work from home, three outside sales reps. I mean, really, that was it.
Wow.
And a lot of TMS integrations. So not direct answer to your question, but so we did Anheuser-Busch API, dynamic rate tree, and then we had another large legacy customer that started APIs, and then right after those two, I was like, okay, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time to build these integrations. So now let me see if I can just go sell directly to the TMSs rather than to individual shippers, and see if that builds a pipeline.
That's smart.
Yeah, and then become alliance partners with them. So then, even though it's still 90 days for an integration, like, okay, boom, now you have access to all 300 of our customers. So, we start. So it was very small sales team, but just the opportunities that were created through the TMSs, in addition to having, the track record at that time, and then good references, being able to kind of go to the user conferences and say, we're also vetted alliance partners with the TMS. It's just kind of things started happening pretty fast.
And I mean, how profitable was the business at that point?
So we made a lot of money in Q1 of 2022. So that's when we started hitting, that's when your kind of revenue per load was at its highest, right?
Yep.
So, and then we're also at our margins, market-based pricing, we were always around 10%, right? But still 10% of the 3,000.
10% gross margins?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we never were hitting like, it's kind of what brokers are expected to make, 10%. And being market-based pricing API, you can't really get above market, too much.
Yep.
But 10% on a $3,000, kind of line haul is way different than what happened literally April of 2022, went from $3,000 in line haul to $1,500 in line haul. And then you go from 10% to, kind of 7%. And so the math sort of didn't add up to the overhead, anymore at that point. But
of the 2,000 loads per week, how much of that was spot based or auction based through APIs, or just in general spot versus annual contract?
95%. That's part of the reason we got hit so hard.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. That we didn't have any stably priced freight. We didn't have any steady freight. And, just, shame on me. Certainly I'm not the only one, but shame on me. I was anticipating that things weren't going to change. They were going to keep going up. The market was going to keep going up. The demand wasn't short term because of COVID. It was because of people's buying behavior and this great API technology that we have and all these TMS integrations. And so we need to plan for things to stay expensive. And so, true to my legacy business model, wasn't competitive on RFPs. But they kind of like went against each other, that model, because with APIs, then we couldn't load backup. We couldn't load published backup rates either because they would conflict with APIs when there's a published rate on the lane. And so kind of lost the published backup rate model, which wouldn't have mattered in what happened to the market anyway. And then, we didn't have an anchor. So it's just like as fast as the market was tanking and everybody sees all the charts and the rates and, we were just on that wave.
When did you first realize you were in trouble?
Probably early Q3, maybe mid Q3, we realized it was like we everything every month over month, right? Going into
got a little worse.
When things changed, we were accumulating more cash on hand and accounts receivable were growing and everything was good from financial reporting. And then we hit this, everything turned for us April of 2022, but really we were also always behind. I was trying to build an executive team and a finance team, and we were kind of always behind on reporting and always behind on, just trying to keep up. But it was like, well, but there's more cash, there's more cash, there's more cash. And so kind of you allow it to happen. Like, are you done closing the month? No, I'm 3 months behind. Well, that's okay because we have more, cash on hand. And then cash on hand starts like dwindling and dwindling. And then everyone goes, no, it's not that we're losing money. It's we have this, invoice compliance issue because we're so big and we can't get these payments approved. And so you're trying to figure out this. And then it's, well, this customer, they want all-in rates on spot and they want line haul only on real-time rates. And so we've got this invoice compliance. And so we just aren't losing money. We're just losing cash. And so you kind of get into this like.
So your accounts receivable was pretty messy at that point, I would say.
Yeah. There's a lot of confusion, and we had tried to transition finance and accounting from Jacksonville into Chicago, and I think it was just too much, for the team that we had in place to kind of keep up with the demand of the growth was so fast, right?
Yeah.
So then we kind of said after a few months of that, okay, no, now like we're losing, but we still have this cash on hand. And we think, like so many people, I'm sure you remember, this is going to be short-lived. right? These down cycles are short-lived. This is just a short-term market correction from COVID, sort of quote unquote ending, right? This is a short-term market correction because of the Ukraine war and fuel prices going through the roof. Like, what do we want to do as an organization here? Do we want to downsize? Do we want to, like, give back all of this freight that doesn't work? Do we want to change margin strategy, all these things, or do we just want to ride it out because we've built this, kind of organization, all these customer relationships, and kind of don't want that to end? So I thought we could ride it out, and it turned out not to be the case. But so probably October, we started saying, okay, it looks like we're in trouble, but I think we can still ride it out. So that's to answer your question. When did I realize?
And
it took a while
yeah,
to realize.
So things from that point, October 2022, you realize we've got a problem here. And what do the next couple months look like? What was the first action you took to try to remedy the situation, to try to fix what you had going on? Like what did those actions look like?
So it was challenging. The easiest, hindsight's 2020, and sometimes the easiest answers are the hardest ones to see. I mean, what we should have done in hindsight is to change our margin strategy, and any contracted freight that we had, either renegotiated it or give it back and lose the customers rather than lose the company. But I when COVID hit in March of 2020, I mean, I had contracted freight at the time. It was just I was a baby on APIs, right? So I mean, I renegotiated all of that. There was a period in which we gave it back because and I told customers, I'm not going to be here if I keep bleeding. So and then 90 days later they said, okay, come back and just what's the new price, right? So it's kind of a long-term renegotiation. But I would say the experience of that time period, 2020 to 2022, a lot of customers, and this, right? You kind of start out losing money on the account until you figure it out. You figure out where the opportunities are. You figure out where the opportunities are, maybe to offset your loss leaders rather than renegotiating your loss leaders, or you just find, kind of new things rather than ending the relationship. You kind of see it through and figure out how to make it work. And we've done that dozens of times. So then kind of we're at October 2022, said, well, do we want to end these relationships, or do we want to try to see it through until we can figure out how to make it work? Or, until there's a cause to renegotiate, that's justifiable. And so that was a decision that we made as a company to say, let's try to see it through until on each account we can learn how to make it work better, and turn it profitable. And then that kind of didn't work, October, November, December. So in December, I started kind of entertaining. There was always someone around wanting to make an offer or buy or do a deep dive, which was also hard. I mean, we'd entertained it a couple of times, but we were behind on financial reporting. And, behind
that
on
makes
things.
It way harder.
Yeah. Nobody wants to talk to you, when you're behind on things. And then we also had this weird thing where in my TMS, it's legacy TMS, McLeod, designed to be asset based, and then they developed their brokerage module very long time ago. But the default setting on lumpers was their reimbursement to the driver, so it's not taxable to an employee driver, or it's not taxable income. It's a reimbursement. So it's not an earning, it's a reimbursement. So that's their default mode because they're default motor carrier based software. And so we had, even when we were behind, we had a conflict in our reporting because even though on the P&L, it was there on all of our operational reporting, we had lumpers designated as, I'm probably getting too technical, but there was inconsistencies, in the P&L on the operational reports versus the financial reports. And anyway, that didn't help either. But so in December of 2022, we said, okay, I think we have to probably partner up with somebody, which is sell get a partner, and
get some financial backing, someone to help
yeah,
keep
to
you afloat.
help us weather the storm, and and so we went down that path, and at the time we still had really great branding, really great volume, really great kind of technology.
What did the run rate look like at this point from the 300 in early?
Oh yeah, we were down. I mean, I think that article, we were about 170, 180 million. We closed 2021 and 2. So we closed 2022 at 170 something.
So
we
that's
had
like
that peak.
that's like 40% down from the peak.
Yeah. And that's top line, but then margin percentage
Of course,
was down also.
and
right?
margin was down from 10 to 7 or something like that.
Yeah. So, but I thought we would be able to, get some outside backing. And it's like, okay, this is time. I never even started this company thinking I would have an exit or make money, beyond making a living. And so, like, very quickly, we found a large company over $1 billion in revenue. That was also family owned, single owner, and got under an exclusive LOI in January of 23. So it's like, okay, boom, we're going to be okay, right? We're going to weather the storm. We're bleeding out. And then, and the LOI was, it was substantial money. It was more than we were bleeding out for, right? And then, so I would say there's two terms I learned in January of 2023. One was material misrepresentation, and then another is net working capital, which they sound like probably easy terms to you, right? But
I'm curious about material misrepresentation. Net working capital was a nightmare for us during our acquisition period.
Yeah,
but go ahead with them. Explain. You can explain them both for the audience.
Yeah. So material misrepresentation is we have this letter of intent, and we're going to acquire you for $40 million, and then you get earnouts, you get all this other stuff, right? And there's going to be 20 million in year 1, 10 in year 2, 10 in year 3, and then earnouts, into the future. And so, and the letter says, so long as you're not falsifying anything, we're going to pay this, but we're going to pay this plus or minus net working capital.
Plus or minus net working capital. Yep.
Yeah. So number one, I said, okay, we're losing money. I've known we've been losing money for a while now, and I'm scared about not being able to make the change fast enough. So went straight to them and said, look, I need to tell you something because I think that it's a material misrepresentation if I don't. Since we're behind on our financials a little bit, you don't know maybe that we're losing money, but we are losing money. And they said, well, how much are you losing? So, well, I'm probably underwater like a couple million, right? So, well, don't worry about it. We're just going to take it out of net working capital. So rather than giving you, $20, we're going to give you $18. And that's not a big deal to us because we can turn this company around with you. You just stay, you keep your team, you keep your strategy. Don't lose your sales reps. Don't lose your customer. Don't lose, anything. Don't upset the apple cart. Don't do anything to change what we're buying.
Yep.
Okay. So then, kind of keep going through the process and all these interviews and meetings and, diligence. And then, kind of you get to March of 2023 and you go, okay, we've continued to lose money, and now we're like 6 million in net working capital underwater. So well, that's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll just take it out of cash at close. And so instead of getting 20 in year 1, you'll just get 14. Like, is that good enough for you? Like, okay, don't worry about it. And then so May comes and it's like, oh, we're like really having a problem here, And so, well, what are you like net working capital minus now? And it's like 10. So yeah, we don't want to buy you anymore. So we're out, right? And that's how deals were going in 2023 because everyone kept underperforming and underperforming. It was getting worse and worse and deals weren't closing. And so that's kind of what got us to May of 2023. And then it's, well, this is a hole I can't get out of, anymore. And this exclusive buyer, and I couldn't shop it around. And, it's just like, it didn't work. And then, so I went to Logicin and we tried to do a distress sale. And we thought that the distress sale would be just the net working capital, maybe a little bit extra for me or whatever, it was, but also the financials still weren't current. And, and my director of finance and accounting had quit because it was like all this pressure, he quit in January. Like we're not keeping up to date with books, and the pressure. And, that's something I've learned isn't that uncommon. People stay until they just give up. I'm going to stay as long as, you'll have me until you hold me accountable. And you're going to find out I kind of haven't been doing a lot of stuff for 6 months, and I'm not going to stick around to fix it. It's out of here. So then anyway, it didn't help in the distress sale to also have lost like the finance and accounting team, and then be behind, and then trying to estimate. You think you're $10 million under, and so anyway, so it didn't work. I should pause because then the decisions that happened the weekend of sort of July 1st to July 3rd, 2023 is I'll just pause there. So we had about 8 interested buyers May and June of 2023. And I will tell you today, till I'm blue in the face, I was just completely astonished that nothing happened. I mean, we had LOIs, we had diligence, we had in-person meetings, and it was distressed, and it was maybe a good deal. And I would have never thought that everybody would walk away. And so in many ways, I didn't say anything to customers. I didn't say anything to the industry. I didn't say anything to anybody because I thought the news would drop that XYZ company acquired us and everything was okay. And, they would stroke a check, net working capital's gone, and we have a finance team to back us. And kind of nobody's the wiser. Not that we're deceiving anybody, but I just thought it would be repaired. It would be a fixed situation, and nobody would get hurt. It would just be okay, and June 30th, 5 p.m., last buyer left the table. And I peaked,
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's really tough. And I'm curious. It sounds like a big problem was the disarray within the accounting and the accounts receivable and getting that up to date. But it also feels like there was a long period where there was opportunity there to try to remedy it. I mean, do you feel like that was a big failure on your part, not to like really focus your efforts on that during any of those, January through May to try to get that thing fixed? Because I feel like that's a big miss that caused some of these challenges for you.
It's the biggest of all failures. It's the single biggest failure. And I would say probably twofold. I think the most reasonable excuse, I don't know if reason, that I can give is that I really did subscribe to the idea that we would turn it around and figure out a way to make these losing accounts profitable, right? I really thought if we stuck it out, we would figure it out. And we had built up such a large customer base that, we didn't want to just go back to a 4-person company, a 4-customer company, which is ultimately what happened. So I subscribed to that thinking, let's try. And also, I would say, like, when 2020, when I renegotiated rates with the COVID spike, and it was my legacy customers, that I had contracted awards with at that time. It's a hurtful process. It sucks, right? But we did it, and the company survived. And it was a little bit easier because my sales team was relatively new, and they weren't the ones who set the rates, and they weren't the ones who, kind of had the relationships. And then sort of found myself in this atmosphere where I had like so much pressure from what sort of turns out to be true with salespeople. They're saying, don't upset them, we're going to lose the customer. Don't upset them, we're going to lose the customer. Don't upset them. And then I got so busy too, right? We're going from 20 employees to 280, and then you go one office to 4 offices, and you go from 100 loads a week to 2,000 loads a week. And so it's trying to kind of divide responsibilities and everything. And honestly, I let go of pricing. I let go of pricing and other lesson learned, which is common business knowledge, apparently, never let sales take over pricing. But I did. Yeah, I did. And then, so there's like this tremendous pressure from the sales team to say, don't make these changes, I'm going to lose the customer. Don't make these changes, I'm going to lose the customer. And this, well, we're going to lose the company. And then everyone kind of always had this, you're never going to lose the company. Someone's going to bail you out. Someone's going to buy you. Someone's going to save you. Don't lose all of these customers. And then, so the irony, of course, is company sort of doesn't make it. And then the salespeople were right. They didn't lose their customers. They went somewhere else and they said, remember what a good job I did for you at that place. Why don't you just come on over here? So to that extent, they were right. They didn't lose their customers. But, we lost a lot more. At least I did. And motor carriers did, but so that was the single biggest miss. I mean, absolutely nail on the head, and simple margin management adjustment that we did in early July of 2023, 3 weeks before we filed Chapter 11, which was kind of a pilot test to say, the bank said, we'll support you if you show us that you're willing to make the changes to become profitable. Can you do it? Right. And so, July 5th, 2023, jacked up our customer rates, try to find a new normal. When I say jacked them up, I mean sustainable rates. I don't mean like gouging. Went from 2,000 loads a week to 400 loads a week, laid off 200 people, and then said, yeah, we don't have enough money to get out of water, but I think we can turn this around. And had I done that in January or February or March or April or May, things probably would have been different. And it was that easy to say, we're going to change the margin strategy. We're going to lose our bottom 100 customers, and we're going to close these offices, and, we're going to make it. And literally it took 3 weeks to turn it around. And yeah, I could have done it at any time.
So yeah, I was going to ask about layoffs. So you really waited until July to make your first kind of wave of big layoffs?
Yeah, because we still had the volume, right? We were still moving 2,000 loads a week. It was just that we weren't making money on them, right? So we still had the volume. We still had need for 24/7. We still had the need to process all of this payables and receivables. The volume didn't change.
So there's a term I'm thinking of here. It's delusional optimism, and it can be. I'm serious when I say it can be a founder, a CEO's best friend, because it can take you to unprecedented heights, but it can also stab you in the back if we're not willing to pivot fast enough to save a business or to remedy a situation. Whether it's, thinking, hey, we've still got the customers and the volume to keep these people and we can turn it around, or it's one of these guys will buy us, somebody will buy us. Because I've seen both happen. I've had someone I'm close to who kind of had to sell their business in a fire sale. And I remember along the way, they kept telling me, like, I'm about to close with these guys. And it never happened. And, it's just challenging because you want delusional optimism to a point, but it's when do you know when that delusional optimism is going to put you under? Because there's always a time, like the smartest business people I think are the ones that can quickly pivot to keep their business on pace or afloat. And it's when we don't quickly pivot that's the failure, and that's where things get to a place where they got to. And I don't know, it's tough because it's hard to know when when that inflection points hits and then it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah. In hindsight, can kick you in the ass, man. I mean, I could have made those changes, even though I was late in realizing what was happening, I still had enough runway, to make them. But I thought, well, let me just have this exit, which, it just kept looking like it was going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, we had
So
the documents to commit to it,
yeah.
but
So what did the bankruptcy process look like? Walk me through that.
you mean just like getting to file on July
Yeah,
24th
just
of this past year?
filing and what
Yeah.
happened with all the creditors and employees and carriers and did everybody get paid? I know I saw Freight Caviar posted something about like 150 grand owed to employees or something and wages. Like, help me understand. Did anybody get left behind here? What
I mean,
did
in
that look like?
bankruptcy, everybody, loses to a certain extent, right? I mean, everybody loses. So, um, if you have bits of misinformation items, I'll address them. But I mean, it'll take time. Like, this is a whole year's worth of information that, was kind of misunderstood. But to speak to that one claim, no employees were owed anything. I've replied on their post. No employees have ever been shorted. And in bankruptcy, they're always the first people to get paid. So they're called priority claims. Is employees need to get their wages, right? And so one of the things that anybody who files a claim against you, your temptation is to say, I'm a priority, right? Like, I really want my money, whether it's a motor carrier or, a furniture vendor or whatever. You want to say, I'm a priority. Well, in the court's legal definition of that is a W-2 wage employee. That's what it means, right? So you might go in and fill out a form that says, I'm a priority because I want my money. Well, that's not legally true. And then so it gets recorded in public documents as wages because someone filled it out that way. I'm a priority, right? So anyway, it was an offshore vendor, and it was about notice of termination, because you're supposed to give 30 days notice. But then when we announced bankruptcy, they pulled their people, and then they said, you're supposed to give us 30 days notice. I'm like, well, that's dumb. Like, you didn't work, you pulled your people. I didn't tell your people to pull. We're still trying to restructure. But anyway, and so we settled, and it went away.
Got it.
And
Okay.
so that number that they quoted was also from an article that was written in July of 2023, or maybe it was early August 2023. So it's kind of nuts, And,
yeah, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I those guys are good at memes, and I maybe shouldn't have even brought that. I've seen inaccuracies when they talked about my business, so I shouldn't have.
Yeah,
that's on me.
Yeah, and
I am just trying to. If you could maybe in your own words help me understand, like, who was left, if anyone, behind, like carriers.
So everybody. So all the motor carriers more than anything. There's some vendors, that didn't get paid, but yeah, in bankruptcy, what happens? The process, Chapter 11 of restructuring, right, is you suspend all of your current debt. It's just called suspended until you can, one, prove that you're able to reorganize and start making money again. And then based on your capacity to reorganize and your capacity to pay, then the court or the creditors committee, who decides what they're willing to settle for, determines if your capacity is high enough for them to accept it, whatever the payment number is, whatever the payment plan is, or if they're better off liquidating you for your assets. So in a brokerage, it's furniture, hardware, computers. It's a very relationship-based business. So it's hard to, let's say, your contracts are worth anything, right?
Yeah.
And so you got your physical assets, and then you have your accounts receivable, which the accounts receivable are pledged, and so that wasn't an asset. And so at a high level, everyone didn't get paid whatever was owed on January 24th, 2023.
July 24th.
July, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
It got what's called suspended until a determination can be made about our capacity. And that can take 60 days, 90 days. And it led to also a slow wind down of whoever we had left in the company, because the other thing they say is you have to look like or demonstrate that you're actually trying to reorganize. So if you have, some cash left, right? Because we had some cash left in the bank, like, so when I called it, you see the headlines, right? Most trucking companies or brokerages that close, it's one day to the next, right?
Yeah.
So they don't necessarily forecast, I'm not going to be able to dig myself out of this hole. They get to where it's lights out and they're just done, So I did have some runway. I said, now that the last buyer has left the table, like I know I can't dig myself out of this hole. But it wasn't that it was lights out that day. It was just like I can't dig myself out of this hole. So we had some runway, to be able to try to reorganize. And so in that sort of capacity to reorganize, it becomes, there's a creditors committee, because there's a large enough number of motor carriers who we owed money to. So they hire an attorney to represent.
How much was owed at that point?
$9 million.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then and across thousands of carriers, which are in some way consolidated by major factoring companies,
yeah, the money was mostly owed to the factors, and the factors owed it to the carriers.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. And then depending on what their relationship is, sometimes they charge back the carriers, sometimes they can't, but and then another thing about our business model, like our business model is transactional, whether it's backup overflow published rates before API or API, it's still very transactional in terms of the volume and the concentration in any kind of area. So what that also means is our motor carriers were also very transactional in the sense that no high volume lanes, right? I didn't have 150 loads a year from Jacksonville to Chicago. I just had 150 loads a year out of Jacksonville going to 150 different cities. So you use 150 different trucks, kind of, right? Well, there's no good part of this, okay? But if there's any silver lining, so the average motor carrier was owed $1,300, when we closed. So it wasn't like we had these family businesses that were putting all their eggs in the basket of the relationship with us, and 90% of their receivables, most
I understand
carriers,
what you're saying.
Yeah, most carriers were owed one load. And I'm not saying that's okay. I'm not saying that it's good, but it's just a point worth making, in terms of what we've been able to do to recover. And a lot of carriers are over it. They're not over it. I mean, I'll talk about payment strategies, but
it's certainly better, and there's no good here, but
Yeah.
it's better than a carrier having been owed $50,000 from you,
Yeah.
and their business, not being able to survive as a result.
Right.
So
yeah,
I can appreciate that point, but I understand why we're not saying that's good. It's
Yeah.
just, it's relatively better than
Right.
10 carriers each owed a ton of money.
Right. Yeah. And then so then it's like capacity to pay, right? Demonstrate to us that you can restructure and what's your capacity to pay. And then we'll come up with the number that you owe. So sometimes you see these companies file Chapter 11 and like don't miss a beat, right? They just need some breathing room, and they end up paying 80% of the total debt that's owed because they're able to just cut where they need to cut and then kind of keep on moving. And then you get companies like, essentially, well, what my experience was that immediately all of the factors cut us off. And so immediately we're just dead in the water, no loads, no ability to cover loads, maybe a couple of customers that were willing to trickle some loads to us to see, what would happen. But for the most part, it was just a hard stop. No one would give us a load. Nobody would.
Yeah, I don't know.
Customers would give us a load. No carriers were allowed to take a load because factors wouldn't allow them to, right? Now,
Yeah, I mean, how do you demonstrate to the court the capacity to turn it around when that's just a simple truth. It does not, whether it's you, me, or anybody who gets to that place, Zero factors are going to give you a chance to work with them, and there shouldn't be many customers willing to give you loads at that point. So
Right.
how are you able to demonstrate an ability to operate in a profitable manner given those two massive constraints?
So the few loads that we could get, I just want to say this before I forget. Triumph Pay sponsored us. They were considered our debtor in possession sponsor. So they're our
Okay.
financial sponsor to help us out of restructuring, into and out of restructuring, right? And so we're to this day, I mean, so we immediately instituted 3-day payment terms, knowing that factors wouldn't approve of us, but that maybe we could get carriers to get a release, or carriers who weren't factoring loads to work with us. So we're 3-day payment terms since January 24th, 2023, and we're going to
July
be
24th.
July. I don't know why I keep saying
You're
that.
good. I got you.
One more year of 3-day payment terms for everyone's our standard pay. So that's been one of the things that we've done to try to attract carriers to want to work with us. And then another thing is, when we started factoring with Triumph, we only factored some of our customers. So there was always this just kind of weird commingling of money and how much is going where and who's paying who. And we also then said, okay, let's factor 100% of our customers. And now they take all of the carrier's margin and advance it to them, and then they advance us our profit. So it's no longer possible. It's not possible for any commingling of funds, and it's not possible for the carriers not to have their money. And they're getting it in 3 days. So that was something that we thought would be helpful and like really popular. And it's helpful and popular kind of now. We're a year into thousands of payments, in 3 days. But it wasn't like an immediate hit, right? And customers didn't immediately feel good about working with us right away in July of 2023. So the capacity became really just my two homes. I bought a home for my mother, when we were making money. I paid down the home that I live in here, quite a bit, extra payments every month. And I never really was, like, I would say, irresponsible with the money in terms of like buying yachts or buying anything,
Yeah, of course.
watches or anything like that. And I mean, if anything, I took all of our profits and I invested it, in marketing budget and growing the company and everything. But I did buy a house for my mom and paid mine down substantially. And so really, Triumph Pay said, we'll give you a loan based on your net worth. And is that going to be enough for the creditors committee? Because it's probably, so I still had no capacity to pay in terms of demonstrating performance as an organization. But they were willing to sign up $2 million loan for 10 years to me to see if that would satisfy the creditors committee to allow us to stay in business. So pay the creditors $2 million and then and essentially get out, which is ultimately what happened there. I mean, there are a lot more details there, and over the 10 years, it'll cost me $3 million, with interest. But sort of getting to like, yes, we'll take that, which it still took another 9 months to get out and settle altogether. But that's what led to everyone saying, yes, we'll take a couple million, and so long as your neck is on the line and so long as you can't leave, Omar, then we'll start settling up with the factoring companies, and we'll start trying to repair credit, and we'll give you ammunition to go out to your customers, and we'll extend the 3-day payments from 1 year to 2 years, and we'll kind of do all of these things one factor at a time, one meeting at a time. And so, kind of over the course of these 12 months, when we got to a number that was just purely based on come and get everything that I'm worth and that Tadina's worth, then, like, let's go. Right. And it certainly wasn't fast. It took exactly 365 days. And there's no like correlation to, it's just that those were the days. But so that was the capacity, and now we sort of have to, we have to hit it. But I mean, I will say, after 4 or 5 months, 6 months, customers started coming back. They're saying they're taking a break. We had to, of course, protect them from collections, from motor carriers, from factors. I mean, there's just so many things that had to happen to get them feeling good. And I think hopefully there are a lot of customers who start to feel good again now that the news is out and we're able to provide more sort of security for them. And there are a lot of carriers who are affected. There are a lot of carriers we worked with who weren't affected, that kind of don't have a problem at all. A lot of the carriers who were affected, like, they're working with us. We tell them, look, if it was $1,300 I owed you, can I give you an extra $50 on the next 26 loads? Like, I know the settlement amount's not enough to make you whole. And I know paying out on the bond isn't enough to make you whole. But, if I pay you in 3 days with no fee, maybe you save a percentage point on, a $3,000 line haul. And let's literally record, we created an accessorial code called pre-petition debt. So I give you 25 or $50 on every load until I've made you whole. And and that's what we're trying to do. And then at the end of the year, hopefully we're profitable. And then share a portion of the profits with the carriers who we owed money to, who have decided to give us a chance. But we are, we're moving anywhere between 250, 300 loads a week right now, straight out. And, we have been for a few months, and it's still not the easiest to cover because all of these settlements are becoming final with the biggest factors and credit worthiness. But we're getting it done. And to be honest with you, outside of anything that's in the media, like the conversations I'm personally having with carriers, and my team is having when we tell them about everything we're doing to try our best, and sort of think of the $2 million as a down payment on what our intention is to do moving forward, but no, I can't pay it all at once. But if you work with me, I think that it's better in the long run to stick around and try to do the best that I can by everybody affected, to my maximum capacity, rather than to shut the doors with cash on hand and then just do something with it, that's dishonest, or just liquidate and nobody gets anything in a liquidation, or, and still be available for comments and be available for questions. And, I got people writing to me on LinkedIn, and I call them and explain the process to them and what we're trying to do. I've been at food shippers this year. I've been at E2 Open, and carriers come up to me a lot of the times and say, literally, I lost money working with you. What are you going to do about it? And we sit down and I face them. I said, this is what happened. This is how we got here. And this is what I'm doing to make it right. And they just go, thank you so much for explaining that to me. Yes, here's my card. Let's get after it. Let's go.
So I commend that mindset. I think the carriers especially deserve to be taken care of, and I think that's a creative way to do that. I hope you're able to execute on that plan to its fullest. Am I understanding this correctly, that if this second time around, if the business fails, what happens? Do you lose your houses? I mean, is that where things go?
Yeah, because the money is getting paid out in the next couple of months. That's so two ways of exiting bankruptcy. One is to have an exit loan that's just paid out whatever the settled amount is. And then the other is to set up a payment plan with the court. And you're technically in bankruptcy until that last payment with the court has been made. And it could be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. There's all kinds of ways to structure it. You could do a payment deposit like we did now, and then a percentage of future earnings. You do all of this. Whatever we ended up doing was saying, kind of 2.15 million now, and we're out. And so the carriers are going to get paid that amount, and minus professional fees and court fees and, postage fees and, all of that stuff. But yes. And then, so that number is not going to change. And if I can't pay it monthly, service the debt, as they say, then I lose my homes and my 401k and college savings, and I lose everything.
And so I hear the plan to support the carriers. One of the challenges I would imagine is still the factors who maybe are out some of their cash, how do you get those guys to work with you again, or be willing to partner with you moving forward?
Most of them are working with us again.
Okay,
The big 10 are working with us again, which,
that's good.
yeah, which comprises, 90, maybe north of 90% of the market share.
Yep.
But we were able to work it out with them. I mean, it's not easy. A couple of the biggest ones, I had to put up, personal letters of credit, which hopefully on 3-day payment terms don't get exhausted. Other ones, we were just able to, I mean, in like just substantial letters of credit. And then other ones we were able to do it without letters of credit, but just kind of the agreement, court order that the funds have to be segregated so the carriers can never get short paid or not paid. Court ordered 3-day payment terms, right? Court ordered that Surge doesn't control the money and we're just operating on profits. Like all of these sort of guarantees that are put in place to then be able to make them say, okay, like if this is court order, not only can we come after you, Surge, Omar, we can go after, the bank that's financing you, and then there can be punitive damages. So there's like everything has to work. And we were able to just work it out. I mean, it took a year. It's not easy, and so we had like the early ones that re-establish their relationship with us based on the letter of credit. And then so you get like Triumph Pay was paying and getting paid. And then the largest factoring company in the market started getting paid and reporting that they're getting paid on time. And then the second largest started reporting that they're getting paid on time. And then so you get like the next 7 go, okay, like it looks like there's something happening here that we can get on board with, but very slow process.
I guess a question that I'm contemplating, because you've certainly given yourself a lot of serious risk here if this doesn't work. And your first attempt, you got to a place of significant revenue in a business that was at some point making money, but it did fail. And I'm just curious, why take this risk? What will be different this time to ensure that it doesn't fail?
Well, I mean, so I would say outside of like personal ambitions or, top line revenues, let's start with financial controls, right? I have a guy who's going to be joining me in a couple of weeks as CFO, who was one of the advisors who kind of helped me just do our even July 2023 3-week quick restructuring, margin management, cost cutting, like can this work, right? And then he's sort of stayed as an advisor to me and interested in our restructuring for the last year. So he's going to join as CFO in a couple of weeks. And and he's got 20 years of CFOs with large brokerages. And so I think, he's also willing to be gritty and do the work until, we can hire a team. So one is like financial controls, margin management, not going after volume, but like, I mean, traditionally I did well with the company and my business model from, call it, beginning of 2011 up until, April of 2022, by just trying to sell on value. Don't need volume, don't need, kind of top line, just need to have a sustainable business with, sustainable margins where it's low enough that the customers are happy. Maybe they don't ever feel taken advantage of, but they know maybe it's a little bit more than a primary, where we're able to pay motor carriers a good amount of money so that they feel good. And then, those two things, the financial kind of controls, the strategy of just having a sustainable company and not getting caught up with volume and top line and size and all the headlines, along with the fact that through bankruptcy, I've been able to control or right size the overhead, and I think that's what happened to a lot of companies that grew quickly during COVID. And even now, as I continue to talk to people in the industry and hear uh, what other companies are going through, their overhead is just outsized, and their volume's not what they thought it was going to be. Their top line's not what they thought it was going to be. Their margin's not what they thought it was going to be. And they can maybe sort of work with that a little bit, but they're really having trouble bringing their overhead down to sustainable levels for them. So 4 or 5 times the office space that they need, maybe, tech vendors and partners who, they're paying on long-term contracts, but they're not actually utilizing any of that stuff. And so one of the things that bankruptcy allows you to do is just end any contract with anybody at any time. And so we've been able to really shrink the footprint down of what our operating costs are to where the financial management combined with the sustainable business model combined with manageable overhead, I think we can make it. And it's not going to be easy. It's got a lot of hard work ahead of me. I'm happy to do it, but I think that those three things will allow us to get it done.
I think for one, I'm glad that the first place you went was the route of the CFO and the financial discipline and management. I do think that was one of the biggest mistakes we made at Molo early on, was not focusing our attention enough there. And it's clear that was a big issue for you as well. And I think that's an important lesson that clearly you've learned. I appreciate the strategy. I appreciate the approach, and I'm cheering for you, to be honest. Just because I've known you for a little while and I know you're a good guy, and I'm hopeful that you're able to take care of all the carriers that were kind of left behind in the interim, and that you kind of do the right thing with all of those folks. And it sounds like you've got a plan in place to do that. I'll ask you kind of any kind of final thoughts here. We've run on for an hour and 45 minutes. I think it's been great. I appreciate how transparent you've been about the entire process and your story. Any kind of parting thoughts you'd give to the audience, any potential, carriers, future employees or shippers listening?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I know that it's not been a easy experience for anybody. Customers have been getting collection calls or harassed or just scared. I know carriers have lost out. And I have so many employees that I wish I could have, kept on board. And so there's been this hurt for everybody in all of this. But I would say that, kind of Bible verse, Philippians 4:8, it's like meditate on the good. I will stand firm behind like my belief that it's better and it's more commendable to stick it out and to try to do what's right by everybody that you can, do as much as possible, as much as what my capacity is, and to face the news and to meet carriers at conferences and to talk to them and to respond to LinkedIn messages and cell phone calls to drivers who are curious about what's happening, than it is to cut and run, whether you're broke or you cut and run and you steal money, or you're just not available to support people and guide them through the process, or there are people going to jail doing dishonest things as companies close. I mean, so I've tried my best to be like honest and in front of it, and to commit to sticking around for as long as it takes to make everybody as whole as possible. And when I lay my head down, I think that's the right thing to do, and I hope other people agree with me and kind of help us restructure.
Yeah, I mean, adversity is an opportunity if you allow it to be one, and you've certainly been through a tremendous adversity over the last year and a half and what you dealt with. And even though it, in a lot of ways, was self-inflicted, it's a chance for you to grow through it and build back up. And I guess my last question would be: have you considered changing the name from surge transportation to resurge transportation. Because I think
I
that might be
haven't thought
fitting
about that.
today.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that, but that's a good one. I might have to steal that. So
There might be something you can do with that. So
yeah, I appreciate it.
all right, man. Well, it's been great. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing your story and being honest about the whole situation, and wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, thanks, Josh.
Thanks, guys.